Welcome to Funnel This, the podcast where fintech marketers and founders learn what really works when it comes to brand building and driving demand.
It's hosted by me, Sally Baker. I'm the founder of fintech marketing agency Wondrous.
Follow the podcast on LinkedIn and Instagram.
Just search Funnel This.
Fintech marketers are under pressure to be putting out content and lots of it. However, it can be difficult to strike the right balance between writing something that's not too technical or too abstract. And while doing that, it's also got to drive pipeline. Today, I'm joined by Mark Binnersley. Mark's a professional writer and has been for 25 years. And one of the sectors that Mark specialises in is fintech. And he's here to tell us how we can write better copy that is engaging and drives action.
Hi, Sally.
Hi, thanks very much for joining me today, Mark. I'm really excited about having this conversation.
Likewise.
Where I wanted to start, I think, is before we even talk about the writing of copy for the fintech sector, I think it'd be really useful to identify, knowing that marketers are under pressure to drive their pipeline, what are some of the key pieces that you think marketers should have in their arsenal ready to fire out to move buyers potentially from that top of the funnel awareness stage through to making a purchase?
Good question. I think you've got to start with the basics, and you need some foundations in place before you start producing content. And from a writing perspective, that means knowing what your brand personality looks like. You know, are you humorous? Are you friendly? Are you professional? Are you corporate? You need to answer that question first before you start writing, and create a brand voice guideline document, which doesn't have to be massive, but it will guide everything that you do from a copy perspective. And that would include your tone of voice, which can alter depending on the context that you're writing in, and also a style guide to make sure you've got all the sort of grammatical formats in place, and you've got consistency across things like where to use capital letters, full stops and that kind of stuff. Is it American English or British English, and so on. So having those structures in place before you start producing content, blogs, articles, white papers, whatever, will really help you stay on the straight and narrow and produce engaging, consistent copy.
And what would be the starting point for creating that style guide?
Well, there are lots of resources online. For example, different exercises you can do. You can, ask yourself, what sort of brand do we like, or would we be similar to, or are we more drawn to? Are you more Gucci or more Primark? It's like looking at things like that and asking yourself, looking at the things that you're drawn to. So go online and search out some of these exercises and get your brand personality nailed in the first instance.
I guess, as you say, not only is that going to be really useful if you are employing a copywriter, but if you've got a number of people potentially that are writing copy in the business, it's important that they are using a similar style, because just like design, you've got to be putting out a professional and consistent message and style, haven't you?
Absolutely, yeah. It will keep all those elements kind of in a structured, consistent kind of way. It will save you lots of time as well. I mean, one of the big kind of USPs of fintech is about saving time and efficiency. And if you've got something like this in place, brand voice guideline document, then you will save times in terms of amends. You're not going to be going backwards and forwards to whoever your provider is for copywriting or design to say, oh, we need to change this, because they will have written it in line with, what your foundation document is.
Okay, great. So coming back then to those foundational assets that every marketing team should have in place, what are some of the key things that you think fintech businesses should be doing at awareness stage in terms of content?
I think the key is to be producing content regularly and not be silent, looking like there are no lights are on kind of thing. I think you need to have, a regular flow of blog content on your website. I mean, that's good from an SEO perspective, and web domain and all that kind of stuff, that domain authority. But I think, also white papers, ebooks, guides, anything like that. I think you've got to keep producing, creating this body of work really that shows that you've got some substance and authority behind you, and social media as well. I think it just helps to drive engagement. I think from blogs are really important. Focus on being helpful rather than too promotional. Try to focus on, how you're solving problems for people. Don't get too focused on one particular area as well. I think one of the things that I've seen is companies might be, completely focused on one thing like awards or something.
Yeah.
And if that's all you're talking about, then you're not necessarily saying anything about what you're actually doing as a business. So you need to kind of keep it holistic as well.
And if let's say you're a startup and you're just starting to think about producing some thought leadership, where would you start in terms of coming up with the ideas, perhaps for the content? What should people be talking about?
I think you need to look into the kind of the landscape that you're operating in.
Yeah.
And think about how, what are the issues in the sector that you're hoping to break into or working in, and talk and be able to talk about those with authority. There are plenty of resources out there. A lot of the big consultancies are doing research all the time, so there's no shortage of data that you can draw upon to use as part of your thought leadership. But try to focus on, a narrative about what's happening in the sector, in the landscape, to position yourself as an authority, as opposed to, it's very easy, I find, for businesses to think we've got to mention everything we do and how we solve the problem, but that doesn't necessarily drive interest or engagement. I think it's more about showing your expertise and knowledge of the sector, and showing to prospects that you understand what their challenges are. So yeah, I think it's a case of demonstrating that you understand the sector, you're an authority on it, and people come to you for information and engagement, and potentially then you can drive sales and build relationships.
Yeah. And moving down the funnel then, so once people are already aware of you and perhaps they are in market to buy, what other types of content do you think that you would need to have as people are moving down through the sales process?
So I think then you're looking at maybe their challenges and pain points and talking specifically about how you solve a pain point or a challenge for them. One of the things you'll see if you go to any of the fintech conferences, there'll be representatives of banks on panels, and they'll be saying, yeah, fintechs are coming to me all the time, but one of the biggest mistakes they make is that they don't seem to know what my challenges are, and the way to get through the door is to demonstrate that you know what their challenges are, and content is one way you can do that.
Yeah, I think it can be the case sometimes, can't it, that perhaps you're that sort of, perhaps in love is the wrong phrase, but you're that sort of convinced by the product or platform that you've developed that you can neglect thinking about the evolution perhaps of client problems and what it is that they need help with, and talking about the problems that you're going to solve rather than just how great the platform is.
Yeah, this sort of brings us on to the what we copywriters call weeing all over your copy, which is where you constantly say, we do this, we do that, we are, and so on. Try to write without using that word, and write more with you rather than we, and that'll force you to focus on the audience. So you're turning it around, flipping on its head, and then you're looking at the benefits rather than the features that you offer.
Yeah, and ultimately all the customer wants to know is how you're going to help them, isn't it? They're not so interested in, I suppose there's a level of expectation that you are going to be trustworthy, professional, all of those things. So it is really about, well, what are you going to do for me?
Absolutely, yeah. Ultimately, that's all it comes down to.
So if perhaps a fintech has got limited resources, so as we've said, let's say that they are a startup and they are just starting to put more content out there, what do you think they should prioritise?
Would it be their website or social media? That's a good question. I suppose it all depends on where they focus their spend, really. I mean, if they're doing things like Google Ads and pay-per-click, then I suppose that naturally leads you to spending more on doing website content. But if they're more into the social media side of things, then maybe your LinkedIn posts and paid posts there are of more benefit.
So sticking with sort of thought leadership and that sort of thing, can you think of any good examples of campaigns that have worked particularly well, and what it was about those campaigns that made it successful?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. There's one that really stands out, which was a campaign, which is an ebook where we sent this ebook to prospects, and it wasn't necessarily that promotional. It was more about demonstrating what best practice looks like in a particular sector, and helping to educate prospects about what they should be looking for if they're thinking of changing to a new supplier in that particular sector. And we sent it out to a range of financial institutions, and one of the first responses back, and it was very personalized, was that this is like the best document that anyone sent to me in a sales sort of format, which is great. And this was a couple of years ago now, and I spoke to somebody I was working with on that only last week, and they was telling me that actually we've just signed with one of the businesses that we sent that ebook to a few years ago.
Wow. That's how long the sales cycle can be.
Yeah, the incubation period in these things can be a few years, but it just goes to show, it's not always about getting instant results. The content is about building up. It's a body of work that, snowballs over time. And if you turn it off, then I think you're shooting yourself in the foot, really. You've got to keep that snowball growing and growing and building your authority.
And brand building just is a long-term game.
It is, yeah. Silence is not an option. Yeah,
you can't expect instant results for sure. And that's a really great demonstration of something that has taken actually a number of years, but
it's really satisfying to hear that. Yeah. It's not a project I'm working on anymore, but it's just, somebody just said, hey, that thing we worked on a few years ago, well, we just got a sale on the back of that, and that was, opened a conversation. So,
and you mentioned as part of that it was actually personalised, so it wasn't a generic piece of content. It might have started out that way, I suppose.
So
but then it was repurposed.
We had this, so it was basically like an ebook, and it got a kind of a generic core to it, but the first opening pages we'd got a piece of copy, maybe like 300 or 400 words, demonstrating what we understood about the business that we were writing to show that we were in tune with them and understood them. And the way we researched this was to find companies, news articles about them, and refer to those news articles. And then for the second page, we had a number of LinkedIn profiles of the people within the business that we wanted to engage. So that proved really effective as well. It was straight away, people are seeing themselves in this document, and it's about me. It's, again, it goes back to that.
It's a thumb stopper, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's not, it's not we, it's you.
Yes.
It's so important.
Yeah, well, that's great advice. Any recurring themes that tend to perform well? Obviously, that's one example.
Yeah, I suppose it's always about advice, really. I think always go back to that rather than features. Giving advice about the benefits and what's happening, what's best practice in a sector, and just if people feel they're being helped, I think you're likely to get them onto the next step.
Have you got a view on taking you off piste here, Mark? But talking about giving away value, one of the $1 million question, to gate or not to gate, do you have a view on that?
my instinct is to say not to gate. Well, certainly not financially. I suppose if you're after people's email addresses
Yeah.
and data, I don't know. It's a difficult one. I think my own personal experience, there's lots of white papers out there that, as a copywriter, I want to read and
Yeah.
use as a maybe some of the research that they've got for my own writing. So I'll put in my email address and I'll get contacted by the company, but I'm no use to them. But maybe for some people it is of use. But I think if your content is that good, and it's going to impress people, then they're going to come to you anyway. So
Yeah, I think it's that I can see sort of for and against really. My personal, I would always say not to gate, because I'm just all about, let's just give the value and people will come to you when they're ready.
Absolutely.
I suppose the argument against that is, well, if you've got somebody that's a really, really hot lead, then you're sort of going to get rid of people that perhaps aren't that interested, and you're just going to be left with the really high quality leads. But
the thing,
yeah,
the thing is, right, with LinkedIn, that's the other source of data, isn't it? Really, it's a big source of data. And if you've got a company that you would like to do business with, or you'd like to have as a client, it's very easy to find out who key people are in that business via LinkedIn. So you don't necessarily need to collect data from a gated article. You can make contact with people quite easily using that method. And if you write in a non-salesy way, in a LinkedIn message, if you've got premium and you've got a number of opportunities to email people cold or message people cold via LinkedIn, and you write with that in a non-sales, non-promotional way, more often than not people do reply to you. So I think that you could eventually send content via that route and know that you're getting it to the person you want, rather than hoping that some random person might download. I don't know. I'm with you. I think not to gate. I think let people see it. I'd rather people be wowed by it, or risk putting someone off from downloading it because they don't want to give you their email address.
And many businesses now also are implementing tools on their website so that you don't necessarily need to gate in order to see who's been engaging with the content.
No, exactly. Yeah.
Great. So moving on now from sort of, I guess, the content itself to actually writing the copy. I'd like to start off by, I guess, talking about some challenges perhaps that fintechs face when writing copy. Can you sort of think of any examples to start us off?
Yeah, I think a lot of the challenges are centered around the stage they're at as a business. If you've got a scale up or an established fintech with a marketing team in place, they will know exactly what they want and they can guide a copywriter, designer, or whatever. The bigger challenges comes with those early startups where you've got founders who are understandably, emotionally wedded to this baby they've created, and they can be very protective, and that can result in lots of amendments. And I think the common phrase is, letting perfect be the enemy of good, and you end up not executing. So I think that is a challenge. I think they can be too enthusiastic as well in some respects, in terms of they want to say everything in the copy, list all their features, or we've got to say this, we've got to mention this about us. Where I would advise, narrow it down, keep your focus on one topic, and keep focused on one area that you're solving, or one challenge that you're helping your target customers overcome, rather than listing all the features. Yeah, there's a tendency to, you've written a great blog about, an issue that's affecting your prospective customers or the sector, and there's always this kind of, desire to include in the last few paragraphs and we do this, and our platform is this, and da 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 da. It's like,
Is it that when you start writing the blog, or when a company start writing the blog, should there be a stage where you're thinking, what is the objective of this piece of copy? Because
always,
I
yeah.
would say that for a blog, it's more about awareness than driving a sale. So that could bring you back to, well, let's remind ourselves of what the objective is here. We're not trying to make a
Yeah.
sale in this piece, so therefore we don't need to include that information.
Yeah, absolutely. Every blog has an objective. And for me as a writer, that objective is communicating with the audience, really, and putting the audience at the heart of that blog, which goes back to my thoughts around not saying we.
Yes.
So it's very sort of common to see organizations that want to talk about what we're doing, but it feels like they're having a conversation with themselves,
Yeah.
an internal conversation. It's got to think externally, think about your audience. So, what does the audience want to hear? And what do you want them to do after reading this blog, which is where you get to your call to action, really. You might not necessarily have a call to action. I don't think you have to have a call to action. But I think, it's useful too, but it's not necessary.
As you said, we know that one common problem can be that everyone just wants to say everything all at once.
Yeah.
So again, coming back to perhaps objective and brief, is there a part in the process perhaps when you start working with somebody where you map out, okay, these are all the things that we want to communicate, and these are the different places where we're going to hit those different things? So it might be that we're going to keep all of the information about our platform to a solution guide. I don't know, is that something that could be useful to work out so that people know everything they want to say is going to get said, but in the right place?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't be so prescriptive about everything about your business in one place. I think your website will be, in a planned way, littered with information about what you do.
Yes.
But I think for your engagement work, I think it's essential to just remind yourself that information is elsewhere on our website. And if people have read this blog and they're interested in us now as a result of reading this blog, I think they will naturally go.
The call to action will drive them to the next place.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you've got links within the blog to other sections that, where you give them that opportunity to go elsewhere. I think it's do not be too desperate for sales. I suppose it's a bit like love, really, isn't it? So if you're
treat them mean, keep them keen.
Yeah, well, not quite that for clients.
Not quite that far, no.
But if you look too desperate, I think it's a turn off, isn't it?
It is.
And people are being bombarded by sales all the time and emails, so you've really got to work hard to engage with people. And I think some of it comes down to just being like human and being yourself. I do quite a lot of work in writing account-based marketing LinkedIn emails or messages to people. And it's always a dilemma. Do I write this in a really sort of sparkling copy way? Or do I write this in a way that if I was writing this to somebody I wanted to talk to, which would just be me talking quite colloquially, would it be more effective to do it that way? And I do think the latter couldn't be more effective than having really sparkly kind of copywritten text that is so obviously looks like it's professionally written, rather than an organic kind of, really what you're looking to do is engage someone and start a relationship with them, which will hopefully eventually lead to sales and something that carries on for many years. So
is there a place for more professionally written copy, which might be the blog article, but then if you're sending somebody a message, that's where you're more sort of colloquial and the way authenticity comes through, I suppose? Yeah,
which comes back to the brand voice guidelines.
Yes.
So on your blog or on LinkedIn, then you're going to be guided by those. But as an individual, as a representative of a business, then I think you should give a bit of yourself away, and because it is really humans to human
Yes.
action, isn't it, that drives sales. You know, I think we do fall into the sort of management, marketing, or technical speak all too easily, when really it's, you know, a lot of sales driven on the golf course kind of thing, and it's people hanging out and getting to know each other and like each other, and that's what I think works. So I think that we can apply that kind of principle to copywriting as well.
And you mentioned when you were speaking then about writing technically, and that's something that I wanted to pick up on with you. How technical should your writing be?
Well, I mean, if you're writing for developers, maybe a guide for developers for your APIs, then it needs to be in the language that is going to resonate and be useful, because it's functional then, isn't it? It's instructive language. But I think if on your sort of, you know, terrible term, front end, if you're engaging people on your website, then, you know, to use that common phrase you see on social media, explain it to me like I'm a 5-year-old. You know, I think you've got to not dumb it down, but be able to write in a concise and clear way that anybody could understand. You know, they say the average reading age in the UK is like 9 years old, or there's so many millions of adults who have got a reading age of 9. I'm not saying that anybody who works for a business that's going to potentially be your customer in the fintech scene has got a reading age that low, but I think you have to account for it. And I think it's really important to be able to write in a clear, concise way. So maybe, you know, you're explaining it, think about it being in a pub and how you would explain it in a pub or a cafe or a bar. You're explaining it to a 5-year-old who wouldn't be in a pub. But you've got your developer standing next to you, making sure you don't dumb it down too much. So
that's the balance, isn't it? Making sure that you don't dumb it down too much. But I think there is a tendency perhaps for fintechs to want to come across as being professional. There's perhaps an assumption that the target audience might understand a bit more than they actually might.
So there's and there is a tendency to use lots of the terms like multi-tenant and architecture and that, and it's kind of, you know, what does that mean? And maybe somebody working for a business that's being targeted by a fintech wouldn't necessarily know what that means. So why not explain what it means in a way that is just really easy to understand without using that term? In terms of complexity, I think if something is so complex that, you know, your prospects can't understand, then they're going to be turned off. And I think the other challenge is writing in a really abstract way. You know, if you visit your webpage, your homepage, and it's got really abstract terms about success and platform and whatever, but doesn't say anything about what you actually do, are you missing a trick there? Are you potentially losing you know, opportunities because people just don't understand what it is you do? I don't know. My instinct is to say you should be explaining pretty clearly in a couple of sentences, you know, how you solve problems or what it is you do, without being a list of features and you know, terms that are, and
what upside the prospect can expect as a result of working with you.
I think it's always useful to look at B2C businesses and how they engage customers, because I think in B2B there is a you know, a tendency to veer towards being professional and corporate, because we all talk very corporate, but actually the B2C people are one who are focused on engaging humans, and I think we lose sight of that at our peril in the B2B side of things.
Fab. You mentioned in our conversation a few moments ago about use of common words in the fintech sector, and I guess this happens everywhere, but you do tend to come across the same sort of phrases, don't you?
Yeah.
And what do you think could be the result of using those overused words? Give me some examples.
I think the consequence of overusing them is that you sound the same as everyone else, and it just becomes jargon, and people don't quite understand it. It's impenetrable language, which is, it becomes the sector or businesses talking to themselves instead of looking outwards and being more helpful in terms of how they explain things. There's also cliches as well, which I think are maybe some of them are applicable to all businesses, but there are certainly some in the fintech world. Innovation is central to our DNA.
Yeah.
that type of terminology, architecture. We talk about APIs a lot in fintech. How many people beyond the fintech world know what an API is or how it works? I'm not sure. I think a lot of people who probably don't understand it. But do your target customers, do they know what an API is? Can you be sure they know?
And I guess that comes down to understanding who it is you're talking to with that particular piece of content. So if it's maybe someone in a procurement team, I guess the likelihood is they might not know what that is. But if you're talking to the developer, then you would.
And another one is drive efficiency and eliminate time-consuming manual processes. So for a target customer, what is a manual process that you're going to eliminate for them? I think it's again, that's a bit abstract. So if you can do that legwork and identify what those manual processes are within your target customer's business, and then you can spell that out to them, it'll really help you demonstrate that you know what some of their challenges are. But if you just talk about it at a very headline way, we help you eliminate manual processes. It's a bit so what? It's a bit, well, what do you mean by that?
And what about when you've just said we help you eliminate? So we're saying you, which is great, tick. But how much more specific do you think you should be? Let's say you operate in a number of different verticals. How important is it to speak directly to those verticals?
I think it's very important. Yeah, I think you could do that you can separate those out and address those in their own kind of own way. I mean, so instead of saying we help you eliminate manual processes, why not ask a question like, tired of filling in spreadsheets manually, that something like that. You kind of get to the heart of it and you put it back onto, it becomes about them, and I think, I'm tired of every week having to do these spreadsheets, or this takes me X number of hours, and if I had a system that could eliminate that work. So I think it's really being clearer about what those problems are
and who has got them.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. So just to finish up on sort of those cliche phrases, any tips for avoiding the use of them?
Don't use them, and think of another way to write around. Innovation is central to our DNA. Let's think about it.
I guess it's maybe just as simple as checking what has been written and just taking a step back and just thinking, have I said something here that perhaps is a bit too generic or overused, and how else could I say it?
That's it. Yeah. Don't try to copy your competitors or others out there. Plow your own furrow and be unique, but be consistent as well with it, and stick to a line of message. Obviously, don't be afraid to change course if things aren't working out. This is what fintech's all about. It's about experimenting and innovating and so on. But don't leap about all over the place because you've had a new brainwave and you want to do this, or keep your messaging consistent.
Yeah, lovely. The old saying, facts tell, stories sell. Never a truer word spoken. We hear a lot about how important storytelling is in writing, and I suppose from a fintech point of view, where perhaps there is a lot of technicality, How can fintechs use storytelling?
I think, well, fintechs, every business should be like studying storytelling and using the principles of storytelling to engage their audiences. I mean, I've just recently read this book, which
Here's one you prepared earlier.
yeah, Matthew Dick's Storyworthy. It's a really great book. It's not necessarily about written stories; it's about spoken stories. I highly recommend having a look at that because it can really inform your thinking in terms of how you write or communicate. And some of the insights in this book are absolutely fantastic. I mean, one of the things that really struck me about it was, the thing that makes a great story is an insight and helping people to realize something that they didn't know before, a revelation. And he uses examples of films. One of the films is Jurassic Park, and you think that is all about dinosaurs and action and so on, but actually it's not. It's a story about how a man learns to love the idea of having children. And there's that scene, Dr. Grant at the beginning saying children are expensive and messy and so on and smelly and so on, and we wouldn't want children. And then he gets sort of lumped with these two children, and he saves their lives, and they spend the night in a tree hiding from the dinosaurs. And they go to sleep in his arms, and he's there. He says, "Yeah, I'm here to protect you," kind of thing. And he has this revelation, and it's like just a 5-second moment in that movie where he has this revelation. That's what the film is all about, really. And this is the kind of wisdom that Matthew imparts in this book, which I think if you apply that to storytelling in fintech, so think about what is that revelation within your business, that you can help people achieve, going from an unknown to a known, something that they didn't know before. That that is the heart of your story. And when I said about omitting things earlier, that's about keeping things concise, because going back to the let's say everything, let's include everything. Well, no, don't include everything. Focus on one thing and you'll get people's attention. And then you've got the permission then to tell them about other stuff. But before you've got that attention, I don't think you're going to succeed with telling them everything from the outset.
That's great advice. I really like that point about what's the revelation. I think that's a great starting point for somebody that's perhaps thinking about how to write something or how to do it in the most compelling way.
Absolutely, yeah.
Fabulous. So, what role do you think storytelling plays in building trust and driving engagement?
Well, trust, I think if you tell a story well, people will like you, and if people like you, then they tend to trust you. So I think that's is really important there from a trust perspective. Engagement, again, if you can get people basically in the palm of your hand. Again, going back to that book, he talks about writing in the present tense rather than writing in the past tense. Opening a story with movement, and you'll see it again with films. They often start with an action scene to get you hooked. If it starts off with just a static scene, you'll never see that in a movie. You're just going to be thinking about checking your phone or something. So I think it's the same principle with engagement. Keeping things in the present tense and having this sense of movement and evolution. I think that's really important. So yeah, those are some principles for storytelling that would matter for fintechs.
Lovely.
I think a key point I'd like to get across is about founders at startups at a very early stage is to trust in your marketing providers, and don't get too hung up on changing everything they write, or really sort of micromanaging articles and design. Yeah, sure, amendments are part and parcel, but really you want to get this content out there, and if it's taking forever to do, then you're not really helping to trying to achieve that perfection.
Yes.
And often people don't quite know what they want anyway, but they keep changing it, and it's like, and you send it to them and they'll change it, and you'll send it, oh, actually, can we change this as well? And it's The other thing, if you've got 4 or 5 people involved in the process, you end up with that old adage of design by committee. And often with a creative work, there's no right or wrong, is there? It's all subjective. It's all
Yes,
someone's
absolutely.
opinion. While there is a right way to do it in terms of engaging people and so on, it all boils down to someone's personal opinion, what they prefer. So I'd kind of urge founders and people involved with that process to just step back and ask, well, why am I asking for this change? Is it going to really benefit the outcome? Is it adding value? Is it really going to, drive that engagement? Is how we've done it going to drive the engagement better or worse? Just really think about that, because if you want to get the content out there and you want to be able to move on to the next piece of content. And it's not about churning stuff out for the sake of it. It's about, having an efficient process where you've got regular content coming out. So for an industry that prides itself on being efficient or driving efficiencies, some of these processes, it would be good to focus on bringing efficiency to approvals. And
Yes.
yeah.
I think we spoke about this recently here from a design point of view in exactly the same way. And as you've said, don't let perfection be the enemy of good. And for startups, it's more important, I think, just to be getting stuff out there and starting to put content out.
Yeah, absolutely.
Than worrying about, because I guess your audience isn't going to be so huge at that point anyway.
No.
So just start getting stuff
really
out
care,
and start
do they?
building some awareness, and then things can be polished as you go.
Yeah.
I also, a couple of years ago now, but it did stick with me, attended an event where one of the talks was about email marketing, but I think the principle applies, in which they asked a question, who here has written emails? And, lots of hands went up. And as the questions went, it was like, how long did you spend writing the email? Can you remember everything that was in it? And of course, everyone's like, oh, I spent hours on it. Yeah, I can remember everything that I wrote. And then the question was flipped, who can remember an email that they received yesterday?
Yeah.
And again, people could remember, but then how much of it could you remember versus how much you can remember of the one you wrote?
Yeah.
And of course, people could remember maybe one thing from that email. So to your point about all of these amends, what's the purpose of it?
Yeah.
Remember that, people aren't going to remember the detail to which, I suppose, to
Exactly
the level
that.
of the amount of time that you put into it.
It proves that point, yeah. Yeah, that makes absolute sense.
Cool. I just wanted to finish up by talking about AI. It feels impossible to have any conversation about anything in this world at the moment without bringing up AI.
Yeah.
But how do you think you can use AI as an assistant to writing copy?
I use AI all the time. I use Google Gemini and others, but I have a paid version of Google Gemini. And I find it really useful, particularly if you're working alone. It's almost like a brainstorming buddy. So you can ask it things or share bits of copy, a paragraph, and get it to rewrite it, and then you can hone it further. I don't ask AI to write complete articles for me. For a couple of reasons. Clients are paying me to do the work. So I think that would be, misleading to just send them something AI has written and pass it off as mine. And the other reason is that I think there's a danger if you rely on it too much, you lose that creative ability. I think your creative brain is like a muscle and you have to keep kind of exercising it. So don't want to become too dependent on it. But it's also useful for research as well. I might ask it to write an outline for a blog or a structure, or just to get me thinking, on a Monday morning. But I think it's been really useful. At the moment, I don't think it could replace copywriters. I think there's an accent that you can pick up from AI every time you read a piece of.
Yeah.
And they love the words like unlocking, navigate, and that kind of stuff. And the sentences are all very sort of similar lengths, are very uniform. So it hasn't got the human touch. And you also have to be very careful about some of the information it throws up, or hallucinations, as they say. Someone sent me some AI research the other day saying, "Oh, can you use this?" But my AI has found for our article. I was like, "Yeah, okay." Have a look. I had a look at it. It got some bullet points with some stats in, and there was a headline with a stat in, and there was nowhere anywhere online that stat existed that AI had presented me with, and that was the killer stat that I really wanted to use in this article, but it didn't exist. And
Wow.
I even asked the AI, this was Perplexity, "Where did you get this stat from?" "I don't know." "Can you tell me where I can get this stat from?" "No, you give it to me." So so I think you have to be really careful. I think it's a really useful tool. I think, if you can use it, it's like, how could I write this post better? And it can give you some ideas. So I think it's adding value in that respect. But I wouldn't rely on it. I mean, everyone said a couple of years ago that copywriters will be no more by next March because of AI.
It's a bit like the millennium bug.
It is a bit like that. And there was a feeling at the time that I'm now in a race between AI innovation and my mortgage term, basically. But thankfully, I'm so far I'm winning.
Yeah, but I think you're right. I mean, to me, it definitely stands out when you can tell somebody's just started using AI, because once you've been using it for a while, you're right, you can see it, can't you?
Yeah.
But as an assistant, great. Can you help me improve the way this reads? Perhaps if you've written your own piece, can you give me some ideas about this as a starting point? But it's interesting what you say about the other danger about the risk actually of it giving information that isn't factually correct.
Yeah, completely. And do some, be a bit silly with it as well. Like, write to this article as if it was written by a whale. And it can produce some lovely metaphors about, the ocean and stuff like that. Have some fun with it, and it can inspire more creativity. Just don't rely on it to be your creative. Don't outsource your brain to AI. But it's really interesting. I mean, it's definitely getting better compared to how ChatGPT was a couple of years ago, compared to how it is now. I think you can sense that it's becoming much more effective. So it's going to be very interesting to see where it is in the next 5 years.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Mark. What a great conversation.
Thank you. I've enjoyed that. It's really good.
Good.
Can I give a shout out to my kids, James and Ellie?
Go for it.
No,
it's that's it. Fabulous.
Great.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sally.
Thanks for listening to Funnel This. Follow the podcast so you never miss an episode. And if you enjoyed it, do share with someone else who might find it useful too. See you next time.